Once upon a time, their inhabitants used to battle against wind, waves, and isolation. Now they're harnessing the forces of nature to provide clean energy. Islands of the future. Role models for the whole world. Orkney, a group of islands in the north of Europe off the rugged coast of Scotland. Until now, an insider tip for tourists wanting peace and seclusion, but soon perhaps attracting energy concerns. Facing both the Atlantic and the North Sea, there are very special forces at work here. After the wind and the sun finally harnessing the sea to generate electricity, that's what scientists and engineers are working on in a research center unique in the world. A technical vision still in its early stages. Will power from the sea change our global energy provision in future? Just 10 kilometers north of the Scottish mainland, and yet somehow at the end of the world, Orkney. A natural paradise of 70 islands that have been inhabited since the Stone Age. A prehistoric hub between Iceland, Scandinavia, and Britain. The nearly 21,000 islanders proudly call themselves Orcadians, a friendly and open people. Everyone knows everyone else. And what you notice immediately is that the time passes more slowly here than in the rest of the world. Something else the locals are proud of. The people here have learnt to live with nature, whose vagaries have determined the lives of the Orcadians for centuries. Stormy winds of hurricane force are commonplace here. As the locals say dryly, we have 9 months of rain and wind, and 3 months bad weather. The Orcadians were early in starting to make use of these forces. Wind turbines already deliver 100% of their electricity. But on their doorstep is an even more powerful force. Hardly anywhere else on Earth is as exposed to the sea as Orkney. Huge waves and searing tides have been tearing at the rocky coast since time immemorial. Perilous currents rage here at 4 meters a second, and waves up to 19 meters high. If it were possible to exploit these forces, that could mean a new and climate-friendly source of power for all the world's coastal regions. What has so far been the preserve of large marine mammals could become, alongside wind and solar power, another mainstay of renewable energy. And nowhere are the conditions for developing this new green energy technology better than in the Orkneys. One of the first to realize this was environment expert Gareth Davies. The idea of generating electricity from waves and tides is one that he just can't give up on.
Wave and tidal are often grouped together, but they're actually quite distinctive forms of energy. Tidal energy is really interesting because of its predictability. We can predict when the tides are going to flow for thousands of years ahead. In terms of wave energy, what's interesting there is that it integrates the energy from the wind over large areas, and so the waves persist longer than the wind blows, and this gives us another opportunity for generating energy.
But how big is the potential of his homeland for renewable energies? To find out, he made detailed calculations. He himself was surprised at the result. It was 5,000 megawatts, enough to supply 1 million Britons with electricity from Orkney. More than a third of Britain's nuclear power stations could be replaced by blue eco-power. But while Gareth Davies was putting together these calculations, there was already an energy industry in Orkney, with completely different interests. The early 1970s saw the outbreak of the oil boom in the North Sea. Rich deposits of the black gold were discovered off the coast of Scotland and turned Britain overnight into a major oil producer. The Orkney Islands were among the closest landfalls to the newly opened up oil fields. In 1977, the Flotta oil transshipment terminal went into operation, soon to be loading 130 tankers a year. The oil industry was one of the biggest local employers, since Flotta was the second largest oil terminal in the United Kingdom. So for the time being, no one was interested in renewable energy from the ocean. Gareth Davies nevertheless stuck to his vision. He set up a small company for environmental analyses, the first of its kind in Orkney. Initially, the people of Orkney just smiled at his enterprise. 20 years ago, terms like climate change or carbon footprint were unknown in Orkney. Many thought he was a hopeless fantasist.
I think if you ask most people that are involved in renewables, they're involved in it for a reason, not just because it's a job. And for me, I've been involved for 25 years. You can't easily get away from it. If you want to make it work, you have to put a lot of effort in. It becomes a big part of your life as well as your work.
Ironically, Gareth Davies' first commissions were for the oil industry. He regularly gathered samples from the local waters to investigate possible long-term effects the oil terminal might be having. Nowadays, Gareth and his team have earned themselves a reputation far beyond the confines of Orkney. They're in demand worldwide for assessing the impact of industrial projects on the underwater world. Their success is built on their fascination for ocean life. Under the microscope, a simple ragworm turns into a mini monster. Suddenly, the dream of generating power from the sea got backing from an unexpected direction.
In the 80s and 90s, there wasn't really the focus on climate change as there is today. But through the 1990s, the focus began to increase on the emissions to the atmosphere, As that transition happened, I was lucky enough to be able to get involved in the renewables revolution.
Meanwhile, the Scottish government has also recognised that its oil reserves are limited and has reacted with an ambitious plan. By 2020, Scotland's total energy consumption is to be covered by regenerative sources. But wind power alone won't be sufficient for that. On the basis of Gareth Davis's calculations, Orkney will be one of the keys to the Scottish energy revolution. One place in particular is the focus of attention: Stromness. A 100 years ago, the village of Stromness was a mainstay of herring fishing. Then, time seemed to pass the place by. But the decision to drive Scotland's energy revolution forward meant a new beginning for Stromness. In 2003, funds from the EU, Great Britain and Scotland set up EMEC, the European Marine Energy Centre. The institute focused on one goal: to set up a unique test laboratory at sea to conduct practical research into innovative tide and wave power plants.
It was definitely a risk. It was a very brave decision by those agencies to actually fund something so cutting edge. They didn't know back then what the industry needed, and to be perfectly honest, neither did we. Infrastructure we already have, so like our Samsø Sound scale test.
Today, EMEC operates 2 large test fields at sea, equipped with measuring and monitoring tools. A third is in the planning. More and more companies from around the world want to use this unique infrastructure and pay over €300,000 a year for it.
They can actually go to somebody with a report which has an independent stamp on it. So rather than going to somebody and saying, trust me, my machine works, they can actually provide an EMEC report which proves it does.
Testing innovative machinery on the open sea sets the engineers major challenges. Energy companies want equipment that's both low maintenance and high efficiency, under constantly changing weather conditions. The machines all look very different, but there are 2 main categories. One sets out to harness the powerful ebb and flow currents of the tides. In this case, for example, a turbine is anchored underwater. Its rotor blades are driven by the flow velocity of the water. Or the inventors try to convert the force of the waves on the surface into mechanical power, as with this sail, which builds up pressure through the movement of the waves and drives a turbine with it. All the approaches have one thing in common: they have to be able to withstand the immense forces of the sea.
If a machine can survive here at EMEC in Orkney, then it should be able to survive anywhere in the world. Nobody has the answer yet. You know, we're seeing some convergence in the kinds of technologies that are progressing, but at the same time, it's very possible someone could come in with an idea that would actually, you know, be better than anything we've seen so far, and that makes it a really interesting field to work in.
Eileen Linklater now has contact with over 300 companies who are trying to develop a marketable product. But precisely that's the focus of criticism directed at EMEC. Over the last 10 years, the Institute has been showered with prizes, but has yet to make a technological breakthrough, and maybe never will. The project has already been subsidized to the tune of over 40 million euros.
People often ask, at what stage is the industry at now? We've been doing this for 10 years. And I would often say probably about the same stage as the Wright brothers were when they first got a plane off the ground. The clients that we work with had said to me, we have to find the problems before we can find the solutions.
Eileen Linklater sees the subsidies as an investment in the future. What's called for is perseverance and resilience in the face of setbacks. She's convinced that the researchers will still make the breakthrough. When she leaves Stromness after work, this Orcadian by birth soon finds herself on a deserted road that leads to her house by the sea. A solitude that wouldn't seem to offer her, as a young person, very much.
Like many young people, I had to leave Orkney to study at university. And I loved the city life. And to be honest, I didn't necessarily see myself coming back, mainly because in a rural community, particularly an island community, there isn't much graduate employment. Historically, the employment has been farming, fishing, things like that. And it's just really exciting that for the first time, and certainly in my lifetime, Orkney is actually a vibrant, attractive place for young people.
Research into a new source of energy is being conducted here, not only because of the unique marine forces, but also because of the Orcadians themselves.
Because we are an island community, we fundamentally understand sustainability and how we need to balance the economic and the environmental and the social factors in a community. That's just in our blood.
Exploiting the limited resources to the full and sustainably. That's something islands and their inhabitants have always been concerned with because of the limitations imposed on them by nature, and especially so in barren Orkney. The isolation and remoteness create a strong bond among the islanders, that and their sense of humour. They're in a clear minority after all, outnumbered nearly 5 to 1 by the cattle. The Orcadians love rivalry and are always absolutely determined. When they get something in their heads, it's very hard to shift it. That's why they'll drive for 3/4 of an hour right across the main island for the best fish and chips. Working with nature sustainably and being open for new ideas are both firmly rooted in Orkney. And equally in the companies striving for a breakthrough in power generation from the sea. One of them is Pelamis Wave Power. The previous day saw a severe storm raging across the island. Engineer Rob Ionidis is checking the precious wave power generator for damage.
A lot of people don't understand what wave energy is. You say, I work for a wave energy company, and they think you're making waves in a swimming pool or something like that. I don't think a lot of people realise how we can get the energy from the waves. Okay, Dougie, there it is. The Pelamis just in front of us.
Rob Ionidis is relieved. The prototype came through the storm unscathed. The researchers named it after the Greek word for a sea snake, Pelamis.
It may not look like much from here, But to me, this is the future of our energy production.
The engineers worked for several years on models while developing their concept. The waves make linked segments move against each other. This friction force produces pressure inside the machine, which drives a turbine.
That's great.
Pelamis was the very first prototype to be tested at EMEC back in 2004. It was a pioneering company treading new technical ground here in Orkney.
When you design a car, you can take it for a test drive at 20 miles an hour, and if something goes wrong, you can stop dead on the road, and that's fine. Whereas us, once we've put it out to site, we're kind of at the mercy of the weather. There's a few sleepless nights, especially when the weather up in Orkney gets a bit rough.
If a hurricane is forecast, or if improvements are to be made, the sea snake has to be brought back to the pier. It's only here that it can be accessed safely. Rob Ioannidis checks the Holy of Holies, the section where the wave power is stored in cylinders and then slowly and evenly released. In the best-case scenario, the plant produces 750 kilowatts of green, or rather blue, electricity. The research work has been long and hard for Rob Ioannidis and his team. The company has been testing its technology in Orkney for over 10 years, and still new problems keep cropping up. The force of the waves puts a huge strain on the connecting joints in particular, where the power of the sea is converted into electricity.
We've come across problems and been really frustrated, but there's a big driving force behind the company to solve these problems, to move on. And it's part of the fun of working here. It's solving these problems and overcoming the challenges that we face.
What Rob Ioannidis did not know at this point was that his company would file for insolvency shortly afterwards. One of the pioneers of this new technology has failed. The critics take this as proof that money is just being squandered here in Orkney. For the supporters, it's a setback, like many other technologies had to cope with before their breakthrough. Once before, in the 1950s, Orkney was the setting for the development of a new source of energy. An experimental wind turbine was linked up to the British electricity grid for the first time. And it did actually turn wind into electricity. But the euphoria was short-lived. The technology of the time was not up to the tough wind conditions in Orkney. "60 years later, wind energy is a fully developed technology worldwide. Orkney actually supplies 100% of its own energy needs from wind power, a development which impressively shows that new technologies require time to reach market maturity. Gareth Davies has also heard about the Pelamis company's insolvency. He's often worked together with the company's engineers. It's the main topic of conversation in the small community concerned with renewable energies.
Unfortunately, there's always the possibility of failure, but the ultimate aim for any new technology must be that it is price competitive against the alternatives that exist. So the challenge for wave and tidal energy is to eventually equal the cost of wind and solar, or to have some aspect of its energy production that means it's a particular value to the energy mix.
Once a week, the marine power pioneers meet up for an informal get-together. It's a ritual that's been going on since EMAC first started.
Early in the morning when the sun comes up.
They all work for rival companies, but socially they're more like a class reunion of old friends. They exchange views and enjoy spending their time off together.
I want to drink. Only love a cup of tea.
So we have three Thomases.
I want to drink.
Thomas.
One of them is biologist Tom Clements. He's a member of the most celebrated leisure club of the energy pioneers. It's a leisure club that, of course, has something to do with the sea. When Tom and his colleague Oliver first came to Orkney, they were surprised at the harmonious cooperation among the researchers.
I think it's a very friendly atmosphere. Although everybody is competing in the same industry, we're all striving towards the same goal. I don't think there's any hard feelings between different companies. I mean, we're all friends and we all like to do the same thing, so we come and spend our free time together.
And we're also, although people are competing against each other, everybody's working towards the same goal. So at the moment, people in the industry are happy to share knowledge and expertise. We talk on a daily basis and we all want somebody has got to succeed, and that's what we're all pushing for.
What fascinates wave and tidal engineers also has a magic attraction for surfers. In summer, the club meets nearly every day. For once, the waves don't mean work, but fun.
It's quite like a family on the islands, with the older statesman of the family probably being Gareth Davies, and then the folk at EMEC. They're kind of like the forefathers of the industry on the island. And then there's been a generation that sort of kicked in about 7 or 8 years ago as the first boost came, and now there's really another boost occurring, and younger people are being attracted to the island to work in the renewable energy sector. So it's kind of like a three-generation family, and we're the youngest generation at the moment, I guess.
I'm the youngest
Well,
generation.
he's the youngest generation.
You're not.
I'm in the middle somewhere.
The Heriot-Watt University has also recognised the uniqueness of Orkney as a research laboratory and maintains a small campus in Stromness. Professor Sandy Kerr was one of the first lecturers. He's aware that settling into the uneventful pace of life in Orkney can be difficult for new students. So he spends a lot of time with the new arrivals.
I think it can be quite a surprise for students when they come here. Indeed, last year we had a student from Greece who turned up in Edinburgh in the south of Scotland at the city and asked where is the Orkney building, and he was very surprised to find himself travelling 300 miles north and over the sea to these islands.
In the beginning, there were fewer than 10 students finding their way to Orkney. Now, dozens of new students sign on every year for a master's diploma in marine renewable energy or marine resource management. Word has got round that Orkney is the global centre for clean power generation from the sea. The students come from all over the world. They all want to learn here and return home with the vision of blue eco-power.
And actually the big story over the past 10 years has been what we call unconventionals.
The appeal of Orkney is something Sandy Kerr knows only too well. He came here intending to stay for just a few months. That was over 25 years ago.
It's really quite a thrill to be involved or around an industry at the early days like this. We're starting to see, well, we call it blue growth, but this sort of industrial use of the marine environment, but for clean, it's clean technology. So it's a very sort of dynamic situation, and it's, you know, it's probably something I'll never go through or experience again in my life.
Major companies are now also climbing onto the bandwagon of the blue energy revolution and investing in research. The French multinational company Alstom is about to lift an innovative sea current turbine into the water. No routine job for all concerned. The machine weighs in at 160 tons.
There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of planning goes ahead of the lift that you're viewing right now. So there's months of planning that's gone on before this, and during the lift itself, obviously we need to coordinate all 15 people doing the job. So health and safety is at the forefront of what we're doing at the moment.
Once the technical breakthrough is achieved in Orkney, the long-term plan is to create huge parks with hundreds of machines like this around the world. The companies are looking to a new source of income. A turbine like this has an output of 1.4 megawatts, the same as a wind turbine. But theoretically, it can generate much more electricity because there are no downtimes with ocean currents.
In 20 or 30 years' time, we foresee there to be quite a big industry in tidal. There's quite a large resource available, and there'll be a few players still in the business at that time. I imagine 3 or 4 big players who are all exploiting that resource.
The competition for market shares has already started in Orkney, and there has already been some collateral damage. Lobster fisherman Sean Dennison spends an average of 20 days a month at sea. A very tough job. Before him, Sean's father and grandfather also caught lobsters round the stormy Orkney Islands. It's an ideal habitat for the crustaceans because of the strong currents and plentiful food supply. Whether Sean's son will continue the family tradition remains to be seen. Fishing is prohibited around the EMEC testing grounds. Those who have been using the waters around Orkney for generations now have to make a wide arc around these areas.
I think when people look at the fishing industry, quite often it's undervalued. I mean, we've been included in very small ways, very little consultation, I would say, for EMEC and the Crown Estate, I would say, on the whole thing, because, I mean, a lot of people don't realise that we use all the water. It's not a farm, it's not like you operate within a field and it's a fenced area. The whole sea is open and the fishery moves, the fish and the shellfish move. So the arrogance is, it can be quite annoying, I would say, yeah.
The fishermen already have to put up with longer and longer journeys to lay their lobster pots and nets. No one knows what will happen if further testing areas are designated, or even whole stretches of the coastline are placed off limits to set up commercial power parks. And that worries the fishermen.
We all fear for the future in lots of different ways. I mean, when something comes up and tells you that you can't therefore work any longer in that area, then it's obviously going to have a huge impact, and not just me, but on a whole pile of a lot of other fishermen. So to have that taken away would be devastation for a lot of guys, yeah.
Fishing is still one of the biggest employment sectors in Orkney, one with a proud tradition that's existed on the islands for countless generations and supports over 400 families. New technologies have often put paid to old economic sectors. Will that happen in Orkney too? Every new technology contains risks, even apparently clean electricity from marine energy. Not only for the job market, but possibly for the environment as well. But they're not professionally blinkered in Orkney. The islands are, after all, a unique habitat for large sea mammals. Great killer whales are regularly sighted hunting in the fish-rich grounds along the coasts. How will the animal world react to the wave and tidal machines as new neighbours in the sea? That's something they're also researching in Orkney. Orkney-born Stuart Williams is one of 3 biologists examining the question. Five days a week on 4-hour shifts, they observe the goings-on around the test power plants from a lookout post on the cliff. Nothing escapes his watchful gaze. Every sighting, whether above or in the water, is carefully noted, and has been for more than 6 years, in all weathers, rain, sunshine or storm. Lisa Mackenzie from EMEC visits the lookout regularly. The Institute is financing the project. Only long-term monitoring can produce dependable findings. If Stuart Williams finds signs of altered animal behaviour, then the designers will have to rework their power plants.
Yeah, see this boxy there, and that's...
So far, we haven't seen any negative impacts from the devices being deployed and operating on the wildlife that's living in the sea. We've even had some nice stories of seals being quite inquisitive on what's happening within the water. And these mammals know this sites, and they know how to operate in the sea far better than what humans do. So they generally avoid these devices, but a lot more investigation is needed into this area at the same time.
The preliminary results are reassuring, but so far the animals are sharing their habitat with just a few machines. How they will react to great energy parks with hundreds of power plants at sea remains to be seen. Stuart Williams will have to spend another few years up here to give the final verdict. But the test fields off the coast are already having a major impact in a completely different respect. There's concentrated tension on board the Odyssey. The crew is about to retrieve a research platform anchored in the sea. The vision of blue power from the sea may be threatening some fishermen's jobs, but it's also creating new jobs as more and more Orcadians are coming to sea, including Douglas Leask.
Well, Leask Marine progressed from Dougie, just starting out with himself, just diving, doing inshore civils works, and then we've literally progressed to a 6-vessel fleet to what we are today. And we've always been involved in the marine civil works inland and inshore, and with the renewables coming up here, it just opened another avenue for us to explore and progress and succeed in to what we have become today.
Essential for the power pioneers is the knowledge of the locals. They know the dangerous waters better than anyone. The next dive is particularly risky. If someone got into the water now, he'd simply be swept away immediately by a current with a speed of 4 meters a second. They're all waiting for the short time slot between ebb and flow, when the current almost comes to a stop. Then it's all systems go. Secured only by a rope and the supply hoses, the diver has 20 minutes before the current kicks in again.
I'll stop.
Down on the head and up on the wire, float the load.
Down on the head and up on the wire.
Slowly, the diver sinks down to the research platform. At a depth of 40 meters, it's hard to distinguish it from the seabed. Time is ticking away relentlessly. 4 steel cables have to be attached to the corners of the platform, and the current is already starting to move again.
It's 117 feet now, 117. I'll stop.
The diver suddenly reports problems with a screw. If they have to break off the operation, there won't be another opportunity for 6 hours.
Leave bottom, clip on your safety line. Left bottom.
Then the welcome message comes through that all the steel cables are fixed. The diver can come back on board. The firm of Leask Marine is one of the many success stories in Orkney, which clearly show that here on the northern outpost of Great Britain, the renewable energy sector is creating new jobs, not just in research, but also among countless service providers and local firms who work for the power pioneers. From maintenance work and logistical services to recovery tasks, as with this research platform, more and more Orcadians are benefiting from the vision of blue power.
it's been non-stop for the last, let's think, ever since I've come up here. So, you know, within the last six years up here, it's from the early stages of all the ADCP testing to actually the gravity bases going in and the turbines being installed and the wave energy converters being installed on the site. So I kind of timed it just right, yes.
The retrieved research platform will help to improve the outer skin of the marine turbines. Each section has a different coating, so the results will show which coating keeps plant growth to a minimum, thereby raising the service life of the machines in the sea. Over 300 Orcadians are already working in the blue energy sector. As a proportion of the Orkney population, that's the equivalent of more than 1 million people working in this field in a country the size of Germany. The vision of energy from the sea occupies not only the people in and around the town of Stromness. The idea has taken hold in other places as well. Sandøy is one of the most remote of the Orkney Islands. It's visited just once a day by a ferry and a plane. If the main island is isolated, this is the back of beyond. Just 500 people live on the 20-kilometre-long island. There are 3 shops, a church, a pub, and a tiny post office. The letterbox is only emptied when a small propeller plane lands at the airstrip. Here there's also the terminal building, where you check in 5 minutes before departure at the earliest. And there's also the Sandøy Junior High School, where the pupils recently caused quite a stir nationwide. In 2014, they designed a machine which won the prestigious Saltire Junior Prize, Scotland's most renowned science award for innovative project ideas. The students invented their own marine current power station and are now trying to further improve it. Like their grown-up role models at EMEC on the main island, the students naturally put their prototype through practical tests. At the turn of the tide, the seawater is forced at high speed through a small channel. Now the machine shows what it's made of. The youngsters impressed the jury with the technical brilliance of their invention. The current drives a rudder-like paddle, which causes magnets to pass each other, thereby generating electricity. The jury was also impressed by the commitment of the young inventors.
I think because we've got these areas, that means we should be making the most of what we have and be making these devices, and then we can lead on the rest of the country and maybe world with our ideas. We've done really well and it's been a good experience for everyone that's been part of it, and it's exciting because it's a new step into the future.
This generation is proud that work is going ahead on their home territory on a new regenerative source of energy for the whole of mankind. Electricity from the sea is already an established fact for them. It's not whether the technology will be successful that concerns them, just when. But not everyone shares this euphoria unreservedly. The machines are not yet ready for series production, and the costs of maintenance and power generation are still too high. How long will the designers and technical pioneers need to realize their vision? And how much time will investors give them to do so before withdrawing their funding?
The pace at which we're making progress could be faster, but we are making progress. And so I hope that in 20 years' time, we may have hundreds, perhaps even thousands of machines in the water.
For me, it's not specifically about renewable energy. It's about this link between the economy, economic development, technology and the environment. That's what I find exciting.
Although it's a small island off the north coast of Scotland, it has increasingly a global reach and tentacles all over the world linking into the energy sector.
And it's something different, something challenging and something new. And that's what, well, drives me and excites me, and that's why I'm in this energy race, so to speak. Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't go quite according to plan. That's why we're here. You know, if we thought it was going to go according to plan, we'd just ship it out there and be done with it.
We've proven it's possible. Anyone who says that generating electricity from wave or tides isn't possible is wrong, because we're doing that now on a regular basis. But we still have a long way to go to the commercial machines of the future.
Remote, and yet groundbreaking and future-oriented. Perhaps Orkney will one day be for wave and tidal power what Silicon Valley was for the computer industry. The place where it all began. Islands at the end of the world, and just maybe the cradle of an energy revolution for the whole of mankind. At all events, the future in Orkney remains inspiring.